Welcome back to the ThermoDiet podcast. Today we've got a fun episode for you guys where we are joined by Matt Hayes or Matthew Hayes. Which do you prefer?
Matt's good. Either work.
Sounds good. Matt is a member of the customer service team and he's a product expert on the team. And this is going to be a really fun conversation. We'll pick his brain and see where it goes. So how you doing today, Matt?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Not too bad. Good day. Good way to start off the week.
Definitely.
So how'd you get introduced to Chris and like the ThermoDiet and Umzu and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. So, I would say it kind of started off like end of my high school career, like my senior year, I started getting into kind of nutrition and health, but had no idea, basically just anything but the standard American diet, and just kind of realizing all right, the food we eat impacts how you feel on a day-to-day basis. I started off kind of from the paleo, low carb kind of perspective, and just listening to a lot of gurus. Didn't really have any good understanding of hormonal health or micronutrients or anything. And then, I don't know exactly how I stumbled upon Chris. I think maybe it was Kino Body. I remember reading his articles on anabolic men, stuff like that. But that just stuff, it all just started to make sense to me. And especially as I was just kind of all right, micronutrients, understanding what are those even do in the body and things like that, which before I just kind of blindly followed people and just kind of got caught up in the sugar's poison, kind of dogma. But yeah, then I just got introduced to Chris, and the ThermoDiet, and just that kind of whole bioenergetic theory way of eating. And then from there, just got introduced to Pete. I just saw his name kind of getting thrown around a lot. So just kind of started looking up YouTube videos, going on the Ray Pete forum. And yeah, that's basically kind of how it went down for me.
Nice. What was your motivation getting into nutrition?
So I mean, really, it was just kind of I say I probably started off with just getting into self-development, and I just thought it was cool. Okay, you can learn to do anything or be a certain way. And then just health and nutrition is kind of a big part of that. If you want to have really good energy throughout the day, a big part of that is going to be how you feel. So that kind of put me down the rabbit hole. And then once I started start there, I just get obsessed with stuff really easily. So just kind of going down the nutrition rabbit hole, which is huge. You could just, spend 5 lifetimes just tip of the iceberg on that. So
yeah,
that's kind of what started it. But a big part too is I've always been pretty skinny. So I was all right, I want to gain some muscle, and what do I had no idea what to do. Obviously work out, but what do I eat? How much do I eat? Really
For sure.
Didn't have any guidance. So I mean, the internet is great because you can just Google anything and figure it out. So that's kind of where I started.
Yeah, it's a blessing and a curse because there's an infinite amount of information, but there's also an infinite amount of information.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's hard to weave through it, especially when you don't have that initial background or don't even know where to go. It's really hard. I definitely feel for people that get confused with all the different diets and different takes on things they see.
I mean, you kind of need a guru, right? At some point, I mean, even if the guru is a textbook, it's just something that you use to formulate a baseline. But I can definitely understand you see so many people going from diet to diet to diet to diet. So it makes a lot of sense in that regard. Unless you have the underlying background, and even if you do have the underlying background, people tend to find themselves in some sort of tribe usually.
Exactly. Yeah.
Cool. So how long have you been working for Umzu?
So let's see, I started November 2020. So a little over 2 years.
Nice. How's it been?
It's been great, dude. I love the company. I just couldn't even dream of working for an awesome company. And obviously everything that we put out, all our products and all our content, I'm all on board for it. So it just makes it really fulfilling to see we're helping people and going through the reviews and stuff. Just we're actually making a change in people's lives. So just makes that even better.
Yeah, it is a fun company to work for sure. So as a member of the CS team and filling my shoes as the first product expert, what is your favorite, most best and worst part of being on the CS team? Or we can be more specific and say product expert.
Yeah, so definitely best part is talking to customers that started the ThermoDiet and they're seeing great results, or they started taking our product and they're this is changed my life. That stuff, it's okay, that's just awesome that, we kind of help facilitate that, or at least gave someone the knowledge to go deeper. So all that stuff's great. And then obviously any customer service facing role, the negatives, people that just, they don't really want to put the effort into understanding our products, or just kind of write it off and like, oh, this didn't work for me. And even though we always try our best to like help people like understand like why a product might not work, like, every supplement's going to affect everyone differently. Everyone's body has all these different things going on. So like not every supplement company is going to formulate a perfect product for everyone. But I think, yeah, I mean, I'd say in general, like a lot of our customers are great in that like they will like take our feedback, like, hey, like, maybe look into this or check out the ThermoDiet and maybe add some of this, and they'll do it. But then, yeah, I mean, the worst part are just people that are just like, nope, I don't want anything to do with your company anymore. And it's like, because, you could like help them, but it's, they're on their own health journey. So
For sure. I mean, if you think about pharmaceuticals not working for a huge portion of the population, and they're like specifically drugs, like chemicals made to do that, we're using natural supplements and trying to get the same effects, or people are expecting the same effects. It's hard to match that.
yeah, exactly. And like supplements are powerful, like, not to downplay supplements or anything, but like, yeah, they can't fix everything. So we don't always have like a lot of information on like, why were you taking the product? Like, what is your, health goal and things like that. So sometimes that's hard to just to, kind of help the customer like get what they want when you don't even know like where they're coming from.
So going off that, what are your biggest takeaways from working in CS, both maybe as a person, just in general day-to-day life, but also as someone that's really into nutrition?
Yeah, I mean, especially for like Umzu, I'd say definitely like from nutrition perspective, like trying to meet people where they are. If you're trying to like help somebody, like, just kind of like if someone's just like, hey, I want to, support my testosterone production. If we just throw everything, like all our content about testosterone, everything at them, like that's going to be super overwhelming and it might just kind of turn them off a little bit. So like just meeting people where they are, if someone's already like kind of into like the ThermoDiet and like that, like, maybe go more deep. And if they're not, like, just take those like baby steps. Same with like weight loss and things like that. Like there's small steps you can take. So I think from like the like product expert role, like definitely understanding that, like at first I was like super eager to just be like, hey, check out like the ThermoDiet, check out this stuff, and just know like that didn't really resonate with a lot of people at first. But then, yeah, I mean, as just like a person, yeah, I mean, I feel like, some people it's just like impossible to make happy, and you can't like let a bad experience with a customer like ruin your day or anything. And obviously like the way that like you show up to a customer, like as long as like you're happy, that's usually going to like help them to like kind of be in a similar state. So I feel like that's just, communicating, like definitely big things.
For sure. Yeah. I've had that experience recently a lot with social media. I got some negative feedback on the video on Friday, but so got to take it with a grain of salt. Also got to, it's good to be humbled every once in a while.
Yeah, definitely.
Biggest takeaways. What are the most common questions you can get? Let's start with, we'll go a couple back and forth, and we'll start with one that you hate.
Like, how long does it take to see the benefits, I guess, of the product? Because that's just it's like a lot of times we'll get that too. And it's just like, in general, like they're just saying of your products, like how long does it take? And it's like, well, like what we're talking about Miracle Morning, which is like, you're going to feel the caffeine like within an hour probably, or are we talking about like Testro X, Thyroid, where those like have a compounding effect in the body? Yeah, that's just, to me, it's just like, I don't know, there's so much context that needs to be added to that, and then on top of that, every individual person's different. So like, how are we going to just be able to answer this question? Like, because you want to give them like a real answer, but so then it's just like, you have to just kind of explain all of these things to somebody when they just ask a simple question. We just get it a lot, and I just wish it was like easier to like explain it to somebody without having to like do like a long paragraph.
Yeah, it's one of those things you just get asked over and over and over again, and there's never a better answer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, what's your favorite question to get asked, or one of your favorites?
Yeah, I mean, I really like when people ask like super specific things, or like just like questions that like are like definitely like things that I would probably ask. Like, for example, like, how, I guess I'm just trying to think of something off the top of my head. Like, can I take like Testro X together with like daily magnesium? Like, I can understand their thought process, because like Testro X contains some magnesium, and then daily magnesium is just like a magnesium supplement. So like things like that, where like, I don't know, I just kind of like a little more trickier, and like can kind of give them some insight. Like, yeah, you could take them both together, like kind of break down the RDA for magnesium for most people is like 400 milligrams, which is like a full serving of daily magnesium. And then Testro X has like 150 milligrams, and like you could you could go over if you want. And like, it's just kind of breaking down all those variables. I like that because I just feel like, I can kind of just like flex, like, okay, like this is more like in-depth nutrition stuff that I'm into. So anything that's like a little more specific.
Definitely. And you can give a really solid answer. Even if you don't give a, let's say, answer, you can give much more general guidelines that will lead them to a conclusion versus like, yeah, well, like this might work right away or this is going to work in 3 weeks. There's no launch date for when it's going to hit you for most of our supplements,
Yeah, exactly. And like really with anything, like you couldn't, no supplement company is going to be like, we guarantee you that you're going to feel it after 2 weeks and 5 days. Like that's the day you'll feel it. It's like no one knows because every like body is going to be like a little different.
Cool. What other questions do you guys get a lot in CS?
I see definitely a lot how can I lose weight, which is just a general question. Sometimes they're asking like, what products do you have for weight loss? Or, they're just coming to us because they just maybe saw like our content and they're just asking in general, like, how can I lose weight? Which that's also like a tough question to just answer in like a single email or like on a single phone call, because it's such a big question. And it's like, there's so many different factors involved into it, but I do feel like it is like an important like question that like people definitely have like problems with, like they're looking for answers. So I definitely like kind of push people towards like check out the ThermoDiet, but also like break down, if you want to lose weight, like it's going to come down to a calorie deficit. There's ways that you can achieve a calorie deficit, but like at the end of the day, that's how you're going to get weight loss. Just to give people like a starting point. But yeah, I love seeing people that like take that and then they'll reach out a week later and say like, okay, like I kind of figured out like what my maintenance calories are. This is how much I'm eating. And then like come back to us and like keep doing that. And then they're like, oh, can I try like Zuber? Will it help me a little bit? And it's like, yeah, it can help like give you a little edge maybe for weight loss, but like they're putting the work in and then like seeing them actually like lose weight. Like that's just so cool to me. Like just to see that we had like that impact on somebody.
That is definitely very cool. Very profound to have some kind of direct impact like that. And Zuber is an interesting one too, because, I do think it works, but it doesn't work in the sense that like someone thinks like, oh, it's going to take Zuber and you're going to shred fat.
Exactly.
It's like eating you're getting an extra apple or maybe a cookie in there. And that can translate to, having to move less or basically allowing you to eat more while still being in a deficit. So it's an interesting thing where it's like, it does work, but it probably doesn't work the way most people want it to work.
Yeah, exactly. Like it all about the like intention you're going into it. Like if you're taking it and you're just not changing your lifestyle at all, and like your goal is like, I got to lose 30 pounds, you might not see the effects of it. But if you go into it, you're like, all right, like, I'm going to try to be in a calorie deficit. I'm going to like set up my life like this. I'm going to maybe go hit the gym 3 days a week. And then you take it. It's like, then you'll see like probably a lot more benefits. And it might be like a lot better than if you hadn't take it, if you're still doing those other things.
For sure. I mean, I think it's like, I like to say supplements are the icing on the cake,
Exactly.
Typically, they're not going to make or break anything. At times they can, just like, drugs can. But typically, they're going to be sprinkles on top and help you to reclaim your health and get back to a healthy state.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I agree.
Are there any other common questions you wanted to walk through?
Or
we can dive a little bit more into fat loss too, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, I think fat loss would be really cool. I just recently saw like an article and it was like by 2030, it's estimated that like 50% of like the US population is going to be obese, which to me, that's just like crazy. Like that's a huge like epidemic we have. If like 50% are going to be not just overweight, but obese, like that's like a standard deviation above being overweight.
Yeah. So what is your solution to that?
I mean, I feel like it's so multifaceted. Like there's not like a one single solution, but I mean, we know the problem. Yeah, my proposal. All right. So we know the problem's probably just due to overconsumption of like calories. And like we live in like the modern day world where you can just go to the grocery store and like for $5, you can probably get like 10,000 calories of like potato chips or, like super cheap, highly processed food that tastes good, that you're just going to want to keep eating because it's like the perfect amount of like carbs, fat, and salt. So, I mean, obviously, like that's probably where the issue is like people they don't even know how much calories are in the food they're eating. Then they're eating those things, which are just super easy to overeat. So, I mean, I think, it would be great if everybody could like go through like 3 months of like tracking their calories and just getting an understanding of like, if you're going to eat those potato chips, like, the cost of it. So, like it's going to cost me like 400 calories. And then you can kind of just like use that to like gauge how you're going to go about your day. And once you do it for like a couple months, you'll just kind of inherently know, like have this kind of budget already in your head. The same thing like for finances, like if you want to have like a budget, you just kind of like draw it out, you follow it, and then you don't necessarily need to like be specific every single day. Like I can't go to Starbucks and have a coffee because it's not like I don't want to spend $5. You just like kind of inherently know like it's in my budget or it's not. Same thing with calories, I feel like.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not gonna say disagree, but I digress a little bit in the aspect that I don't really think, I think it's good practice for everyone to have track their calories, but I don't really think like we should have to track our calories.
I would say like we don't have to track our calories like on a daily basis, but I think it's just like that's one tool that we should utilize to get people to just understand. Because just like for my example, my dad's like trying to lose some weight. I'm like, how many calories like do you think you roughly eat? And he has no clue. So like get him to start tracking, and he's like, okay, I'm eating like 2,700 calories a day. And I'm like, okay, like now start tracking, but eat like 2,500. And like he wasn't eating a lot of protein, so like up your protein a little bit, and then like maybe up your carbs and lower your fat. So he like inherently has to kind of change the way like the foods he eats, and without even saying like eat more of this or less of that. Then he also too like kind of understands the composition of the food. I think that's like where all the valuable lessons are in there. But then like I mean, he doesn't need to do that for the rest of his life. But like if you have like a specific weight loss goal, at least for me, I feel like, or a weight gain goal, like sometimes that's like the best way, because you can just get like meticulous, but you don't need to like obsess over it. But just to get on track and like make sure you're kind of like staying consistent.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I completely agree. I just don't think that it might be feasible for every 50% of the population to track their calories. And my point to that is that I don't think we should necessarily need to track calories, in the aspect that if we were eating better foods, that we'd probably be able to burn more calories. I think a lot of those, the highly unsatiating, I made a post about this a while back. No one has gotten fat ever from eating too much fruit. And that's kind of a joke. Like it's probably happened, but like no one has really, just slammed too many blueberries and was like, oh, I can't make it down the stairs right now. My back hurts. Like I gained 30 pounds.
No, 100%. Like, yeah, the other option is we just get rid of processed food and everybody eats like whole foods. I feel like that's just inherently going to solve probably the problem too. Mm-hmm. But I think where the problem is, like from like a psychological standpoint, is like there's no way we're ever going to get rid of all the processed food. So we have to kind of, to me, it's like show people like why we don't want you to eat processed food. It's not just like because the food, like obviously most of it is kind of inherently bad because it's just devoid of nutrients and everything. But and that's a whole nother topic. Like micronutrient density is really what you should be eating for. But you kind of will just like show them like this is kind of like how much you're paying, how many calories you're paying for like a bag of potato chips versus like a banana. Then they can kind of make that conclusion themselves. So I feel like that's kind of like my perspective, at least, or my take on it.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I think that's something I've been thinking about as well. When I was asked I would describe the ThermoDiet, I think on Saturday. And, I don't think it's a good answer to say it's a high carb, moderate fat, moderate protein diet, because it doesn't really encompass what the ThermoDiet is about. And I think a useful means of defining the ThermoDiet or the repeat diet or whatever you want to call it would be a diet aimed towards maximizing nutrient density, which is what you were just alluding to. And thinking about foods in terms of nutrient density is a very good practice. How would you describe the ThermoDiet?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically how I would describe it too, is like there's only so many foods like you can probably say fit into your like daily diet. So like if you're trying to optimize your health and be like healthy, which I mean, we don't like necessarily define, like a lot of people don't really define what healthy is, but from a diet perspective, I would say like the healthy diet is going to be the diet that has the most like dense nutrients in it, or the most like nutrients without any like thing that's going to be like harming it. So it's just like kind of the ThermoDiet. And what makes like what made it appeal to me is like we're just kind of looking at each food or food group and going like, okay, these are nutrient dense. They don't have like anti-nutrients or phytic acid or something that's going to like make it so your body can't absorb those nutrients. So like you're actually getting the nutrients from it. Or like say like harmful things in the food too that, you just don't want to get in for other reasons. And then we're just saying like, these are kind of like our top, like get 80% of your food from these foods. There's obviously like a lot more to it, but yeah, I mean, just like a micronutrient dense diet is probably the best like way to describe it. That's how I describe it to like everybody. Like I just eat for micronutrient density versus like anything else.
It's a great way of looking at it. You're ahead of me. I just thought of that recently. So you brought up another good point, and that's one of my favorite things to talk about. I've started asking every guest on this podcast this question, and it's my favorite article I've ever wrote, I think. What does it mean to be healthy to you?
Yeah, so I think like I've thought about this a lot because I mean, coming from like a low carb kind of keto paleo perspective, when I didn't really have like much of a like idea of like what like the full body like kind of was, like what happened in the body with like the food you eat and things like that, I was really just kind of like blindly following people that were like, sugar is toxic because it spikes insulin, and insulin causes you to gain fat and causes diabetes. Like that's kind of just like what, like I was just like, yeah, okay, that's how it goes. Which I mean, it sounds great in theory. Like it's like, okay, this makes sense, but like there's so much missing from the context of that. Like there's like, I mean, we could probably sit here and talk hours about why like that doesn't make sense. But like at the end of the day, like what healthy is should obviously one be like absence of like disease, which is pretty like normal. I feel like that's kind of like what the mainstream take is just absence of disease. But then also just like, everything should be kind of optimized. In a perfect world, it might be impossible to achieve like fully optimized like hormonal health and micronutrient status, because like things are always going to be changing. You're going to have different stress levels and things like that. So it's not like something that might like be achieved, but like, optimizing all of your body's systems, I would say. I don't think there's like really two, like everything's contextual. Like healthy to one person might mean, they weigh like 20 pounds more. If they are trying to gain weight, healthy to another person might be 20 pounds less, or healthy to one person might be like, they have to like lower their blood pressure, and healthy to another person might be, something completely different. So there's always like kind of context behind it. Like just feel like the direction that everyone's kind of heading is like, optimizing your like just general like quality of life.
Yeah, some of my favorite definitions all revolve around obviously like not being diseased, and then on top of that, just having the energy and the, let's say, acute awareness or the ability, the motivation or drive or whatever we want to call it, to go and do whatever the things you want to do. You don't feel like you're stuck on the couch. Like if you decide, someone says, let's go for a hike, you're like, all right, I'm down. Or you're like, I don't really want to do that. I'm going to pick up this book. Like, just like general, I guess the idea of health is, having the capacity to do the things in life that you want to do and not be hindered by, your body or your mind.
Yeah. Like that's a great example. Like, I mean, I think the reason that like, we get so into like health and nutrition and like obsess over it is like, it's the gateway. Like everyone at some point in your life, like whether you're like on your deathbed or you're just like have like a health scare, like health becomes your main priority at some point. Like you don't necessarily know when. And so you could either, right now decide like, I'm going to make that like my main priority, or just wait until it happens. But it just is like the gateway to like let you do whatever you want to do in life. Like if you're healthy and you can, like mobile to go do anything, like you can do like whatever you want in life. But if you're like kind of stuck, like you're bedridden or something like that, like those are the extremes. But yeah, that just like hinders your ability to like live a happy life. So like that's why I think like, everyone gets obsessed with health, and then we sit here and like argue online about like these little minute details that like don't really matter as much. But at the end of the day, it's just like, yeah, like I want my like health to just be like kind of on the back burn. I mean, I still obsess over it because like obviously like it's just like something I'm passionate about. But I want it to kind of be on the back burner and just like let me be what like lets me kind of just like live my life and have like a great life.
For sure. I also feel the more, let's say, the longer I've been Thermo, the better I feel in general and the easier it gets. It's just eating that kind of thing. I feel like it has a lot of compounding things. Like I look pretty red on camera right now, but I've been tanning this year. I tanned way easier than I have or have in the past. Haven't really burned at all either. It's also only April, so I'm probably going to be pretty dark by the end of summer if I'm living down the shore. But so and I think that has to do obviously with the saturated fat content of my skin, replacing that with the PUFAs just from eating a ton of saturated fat. But so, did you have any bad experiences when you were on keto slash low carb slash paleo?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny because I remember like, so I know I would say like I was probably like I never went like full keto, like did like a long period of time where I was like not eating any carbs. But when I started off, I like slowly just kind of was eating less and less carbs. But I was also kind of like coming from like the standard American diet, so like everything felt amazing, like just eating like whole foods. But what would happen a lot is like days where like say I'd go out to eat with like friends or family and like eat just like a higher carb meal that day. The next day I'd like go to the gym and I'd feel awesome and I'd be like, wow, this is great, like why do I feel so great? And I'd always think like, could it be the carbs? And then like you go online and you see like the keto guru like talking about how it's poison. It's like, nah, it must have been something else. And then just like kind of fully coming around and being like, okay, let me just try like incorporating more carbs into my diet from like fruit or like potatoes or rice. And like, oh, it's definitely just the carbs. Like, what am I doing? Like, why haven't I been doing this before? I think that was like a really big thing to me, is just like could definitely feel the like depriving myself of like glucose.
And since reintroducing carbs, you're fully diabetic, obese, and
Yep, exactly.
yeah, okay, cool. Just wanted to clarify. Um, Kyle Munoz, he's Genius Bits on Instagram, and he came on. He was talking about how when he was keto, he was doing jujitsu training for that, and after every time he would get a headache, and it just wouldn't go away, and he couldn't figure out why. Eventually, I think he started phasing back carbs, and it was like, wow, headaches gone away. And we were just joking around because he wasn't training for his marathons hard enough, or in fully deep into ketosis.
Yeah, exactly. It's like and if you kind of like blindly follow it, that's might be what you think is just like, oh, I'm not, I'm not in ketosis
Mhm.
enough. So it's like, it's wild just the way that like carbs will make you feel good even
It's
after
also
like a couple hours.
Yeah, it's also interesting in the terms of the self-fulfilling prophecy, because the less you eat carbs, the worse they make you feel.
Hmm.
Generally, I don't know if you found the same way.
Yeah, definitely like transitioning out of like a low carb diet, like the first some days where it'd be probably like I have like 150 grams of carbs is like when I'd feel good the next day, going from like probably normally only eating like 80
Yeah.
grams of carbs. But yeah, then like trying to like make a big jump to like 300 grams of carbs or something like that, which for me now is fine, but back then it was definitely like a transition where I just feel like all the negative effects that you hear people normally talk about, like carbs in kind of that low carb space, were like kind of what I would feel. So it is a self-fulfilling prophecy, because like obviously your body has to like get used to kind of metabolizing carbohydrates again.
Yeah, insulin response, the enzymes that are need to break that down, all that stuff probably decrease when you're not eating them. So it is interesting. How would you, let's say I'm full keto, I message in, say, hey, my thyroid's not feeling great, blah, blah, blah. I have low energy in the gym, low libido, whatever it may be. Matt, how do I best transition to, and what should I best transition to?
Yeah, so I mean, I would definitely like we have so much like content in Noomzu Fit. I would probably push them towards like looking at the ThermoDiet and Noomzu Fit, but like more specifically from like a macronutrient standpoint, they're probably getting a good amount of protein if they're like keto, and then everything else is fat and low carb. I'd say like slowly, gradually, kind of increase your carb intake from probably like fruits and things like that, and start to like kind of incorporate more of those like Thermo approved fruits. And like over time you should kind of be able to handle more. But yeah, I mean, it's going to vary too, because like some people might be able to transition a lot faster than others. So I would just kind of tell probably like a general guideline, just to kind of like slowly incorporate it instead of just like going from one all the way to the other. And just like now you're just like doing like if we normally recommend like maybe 50% of your calories from carbs, like you might not want to do that if you're full blown keto and then you're slowly transitioning, but like a slow process would probably work better.
For sure. Is there any nutrient timing recommendations you give?
For me, like what worked for me was definitely like more carbs at night. That's just me. So, I mean, I would say what their preference is, but I feel like carbs definitely helped me like sleep better, especially transitioning from like low carb. So if you can position them later in the day, but also like some people, they benefit from like more carbs in the morning. Some people are like kind of more like they just want their protein and fat. So you could play out with that. It's definitely something I think worth like if someone's doing that, like to kind of play out and see what works for them.
Yeah, I generally recommend at night because usually people crash after they start phasing back carbs, so that will help them sleep better and supply them with glycogen. And then you could argue in the first thing in the morning. I think sometimes that can help with hit or miss, but post workout generally too, just because they have such a high insulin sensitivity. So you're generally your most insulin sensitive times, so which would be morning and post workout. And then at night, because it doesn't really matter as much, just because even if you feel like crap after, you're just going to go to sleep anyway, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. The definitely post-workout. I remember like transitioning to eating more carbs, like the workout pumps and just like the feeling muscles like filling out. It's just like you feel great for workout wise.
So going thermo in general, what have been your biggest takeaways and tips that have allowed you to succeed better or succeed more with the diet?
Like with the ThermoDiet, like
So starting from a keto, paleo place, or just in general, things tips, hacks that you found to, let's say, maybe maintain your weight or gain weight with some muscle, or just in general life practices that have allowed you to feel better.
Yeah, so I mean, a big thing like that I did, like kind of along with like tracking your calories, was Chronometer, which will like you can plug in. Like any whole food is usually in their database and you can get a good like micronutrient profile on it. That was huge for me because I could just see like, I like obviously following kind of like our Thermo food list, which are all like great food recommendations, but just to see like how much of a micronutrient you're getting or not getting is really like beneficial. I think any diet should like at least test that out and maybe just put in a day just to see what they're eating, because then I could kind of see like, okay, maybe I need to get more like B3, need to like add in these certain foods. And then you can just kind of like look and figure that out. And then once you have like a full day of Chronometer where you're like kind of hitting your micronutrient targets, you just kind of feel amazing. Like even before you get there, it's just like, if you feel good and effortless. So that was definitely a big thing to me. And then also like I definitely like started to just eat more throughout the day. Like even smaller meals, just kind of like having more food throughout the day. I just feel like it had helped me like sustain my energy levels better. And then, incorporating like quick, easy meals, like some cheese and like fruit or something like that. Those are always just like easy to like get a quick like snack in. For me, it was definitely gaining weight. Like I probably was like 150 pounds when I got into like ThermoDiet stuff. And now I'm like 180. So it definitely took like a lot more calories. And I feel like I'm somebody who definitely, if I don't like think about it, I could just go like a day with like out eating food. Like it's just not something I think about or like put as a priority. Now I do, but like in general, I used to not. So definitely like prioritizing like getting in enough calories and feel a lot better. I'm definitely somebody where like in kind of like that keto low carb, I think a lot of the times where I felt like I had really good energy, it was really just stress. Like my cortisol is probably just through the roof and I'm just feeling like, wow, I'm so wide awake, but it's like, then you can't sleep at night either. So like then you're getting bad sleep and you just kind of compound effect of stress. That's not really ideal.
Yeah, I was for a long time, a number of years, I was obsessed with Gregor Gallagher. So I was doing intermittent fasting. And at one point, I tell this story too much, but I was going to the gym at 5. I was working out after, so I was landscaping for the summer. I was working out after landscaping. I was like, dude, I feel like crap when I go and work out after landscaping. I also wanted to do jiu-jitsu. So I started waking up at 5, going to the gym, landscaping for 8 hours, coming home, eating dinner, and then going to jiu-jitsu and just repeat 5 days a week. But I was fasting the whole time until 5 o'clock when I got off dinner before I went to jiu-jitsu at 6:30. So, and I felt fine. You feel fine. You just, brag about all the autophagy you're doing. But looking back, I was very reactive, not very chill. Now I'm zen like a monk. I'm floating here, not even sitting down.
Yeah, it's a different level of like energy when you like versus like stress. Like it's hard to like it really like kind of explain without feeling it, but like having like, being high energy, that's not stress. It's definitely more of like a zen. Like you could, like you kind of mentioned earlier, like, yeah, you want to go for a hike? Like, yeah, I could, or I could just kind of sit on the couch and read a book. But like the mental energy is there and you don't feel as reactive to just like, just a random stress or inconvenience or something like that.
Yeah. Have you heard Georgie talk about that rage is largely fueled by a deficit in ATP in the brain?
No, but I mean, I haven't heard him specifically talk about that, but like it kind of makes sense. Like yeah.
Yeah, I think he said when energy levels are at 80%, which isn't that crazy, right? I mean, I guess you think of the brain very sensitive, very fine-tuned, but 20% dip in energy levels and ATP levels specifically, and you get these rage fueled episodes, which is kind of crazy to think about how much energy impacts the body.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we kind of all inherently know that too, like the term like hangry and stuff like that. Like people know, like, you know, if you need food, like energy, like you can get like irritable and like angry. So it's just kind of funny, like we know these things like inherently, like that's kind of just like a normal thing that people like hear, but we don't necessarily like always like take those same applications to like our like diet and things like that.
So when you aren't diving into chronometer, but by the way, I think tracking macros is really boring, but tracking micros is kind of fun.
100%. I agree 100% with that. I think like macros is like the first baby step. Like if you have no understanding of like protein, carbs, fat, and calories, counting your macros is like a good like kind of first step to get used to. But once you're like there and you kind of have a good understanding, micros, it's so much cooler, and you can it's just like you can play around with it, see like, okay, today I'm gonna go like eat a lot more of this food to get more of a certain micronutrient. Yeah. I definitely agree.
You're like, wait, what foods have copper in it? Oh, this is cool. I didn't know this. Oh, wait, magnesium. Oh, I can get that from there. Oh, I had no idea. Like that becomes fun because you start learning about food more so than, I guess, like the energy intake of the food, which is generally, I feel like most people have some sort of awareness of, what's fat, what's carbs, what's protein.
Yeah.
And, some foods are fattier than others. But when you get into like the nuanced stuff, it's really where it gets fun, in my opinion, and yours as well. So when you're not tracking your macros, going for getting your copper levels up, what are your favorite things to research?
I've been big in like AI. I think that's really interesting. Just like all the applications of that. That's not really health related, but yeah, I think that's just, I mean, I just love playing around with all these like new AI like models, like ChatGPT and stuff like that.
Yeah, they freak me out.
Yeah, it's kind of wild.
It is.
I'm just like somebody who like as soon as I see something like that, I'm like, okay, I need to understand it. Like, like same with like health concepts. I'm like, all right, I need to understand, and then just go down like a deep rabbit hole. So like, yeah, that's something like right now I'm just kind of into like just.
No, they're interesting for sure. What do you think about ChatGPT?
I think it's cool. Like, I mean, I think it definitely is like really powerful, but like there's definitely a lot of limitations to it. Yeah. So there's like, I think there's going to be a lot of cool things like built with their like language model, but I don't know. It's like, it's hard to say. Like people are like saying AI like taking people's jobs. Like right now, at least the current state of like GPT, I think there's still always going to need to be somebody who's just like using it maybe to be a little more productive. But I don't know. I've had it try to like give me a meal plan, and it like I'd say like I don't want to eat, like I don't want nuts or legumes, and then it's like add a handful of almonds in there, and I'm like no nuts or legumes. So it's like kind of, it's not like perfect or anything that. But it's definitely really interesting. I think it definitely could help make people like more productive and like help, like do things a little more efficiently. But right now there's a lot of limitations. I just think what's fascinating is just like, if we kind of exponentially grow at this rate, like what kind of AI will we have in the future?
It will be nuts. I also kind of think like Siri is basically AI, right?
Yeah, like that's just like a lower level kind of AI. Yeah.
So it'll be interesting how that just, it'll just get more integrated. You'll have your own little, like Siri will be just a real assistant pretty much, just hanging around.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Kind of already is. So it'll be crazy when it gets really integrated. I'm sure Apple's working on that right now.
And then there's like all the like music AI. Like, have you seen like the Drake songs that are like being made with AI? Like that, all that stuff is just, it's wild to me that like we even had like, we're able to like make a program that can do that.
My favorite things are the president deepfakes.
Oh yeah, those are so funny.
So for anyone that doesn't know, deepfake is when they use the AI to basically imitate the voices of certain famous people. So you can just take, hours and hours of their footage and record their voice, and then they can basically put words in their mouth. And so these guys on TikTok is where I watch it occasionally. And they're just like Biden, Trump, and Clinton, George Bush, whoever they want, Jordan Peterson, just playing video games with each other, like in a group chat. And it's just hilarious watching them go back and forth, just like pretending to like make fun of each other.
Yeah, they'll be like playing Minecraft and just like, it's like, what? It's just so weird because it feels so real. Like you can actually like hear their voice and everything.
It's so funny to think about. What about specifically in the health world? Anything you've been researching recently?
I've been doing a lot in like towards like, so I had like some knee pain.
Oh,
So I have
nice.
like flat feet. So I've been like looking into just like ways to, I've kind of like, it's been something I've been like dealing with over a year. Basically like anytime I would like squat, if I
Hmm.
do like kind of a heavy squat, I'd feel some like knee pain the next day. So I'm just kind of like tendon research or just like kind of seeing what people say, like, exercises for like tendon, the knees over toes guy. I've been kind of like getting into him and doing some of his stuff.
Yep.
That's kind of like at the moment, I would say kind of what I've been like kind of focused on. And like, yeah, I mean, a lot of this stuff is just kind of like common sense. Like I've
Yeah.
never focused on like doing exercises like for my tibs, but like stuff like that like really helps. So yeah, for me, it's mostly like just making sure I can like kind of keep it a routine. What I'll do is like a couple exercises, feel good for like a week, and then just kind of stop, and then it'll come back like 2 weeks later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you have any good resources on like stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, what have you been doing for your knee?
So yeah, like I've been doing like backwards walking. I don't have a sled at my gym, but that would be ideal, like a sled,
Yeah.
like backwards sled. And then I've been doing like tib raises. I have like a tib bar. So those are like the two big things. I forget the exercise. I think it's like the Polican step up,
Yeah.
things like that. Those are mostly what I've been doing, and that's helped a lot. And then I'm just slowly, instead of like what I would do in the past is something like that, and then my knee feels good, and then I just kind of go
Mhm.
back to like heavy squats, and then it would just kind of not
Is it
really help.
tendonitis?
I feel like it's tendonitis. I don't really like know enough, but based off of everything I've kind of researched, I feel like
Yeah.
it's probably patellar tendonitis or something,
Yeah. You can pretty
along
test
those.
it pretty evenly. Like if you just press right on your patella, you'll feel it being sore generally.
Yeah.
It's pretty much, it's pretty reliable to test for patellar tendonitis. I mean, typically what you want to do with tendons is they do a lot of isometric loading. So I would recommend, there's a couple approaches you can take. Number one is, aligning force through the joint. So a lot of people, right, we all have this thing called a carrying angle for the arms, which is where no one's arm sits like this on their side, right? They all come out in this kind of angle. So the same thing with your knee, a little bit less so, but figuring it out. So most people will do a leg extension sitting out to the side, and their knees they need to rotate their hips and straight so they can get in this thing. So a lot of people will generate knee pain. I think a lot of times from leg extensions more so than squats. It just kind of shows up in squats. So you can either do it one legged or kind of align it better. Looking at your squat form, obviously, a lot of, like, it's not necessarily the form. A lot of times it's set up so you have flat feet. So you might be better off. I don't know what kind of squats you're doing, but putting a heel elevation in. So squat shoes, something like that.
Yeah, I've definitely looked at the heel elevation, and I noticed a big difference like the past couple months, like just putting like a plate underneath
Mhm.
my heels. And so, yeah, that's definitely helped a lot.
The issue with the plate sometimes, and it can be a useful solution, is that your foot needs something to collapse into to pronate. So when you take away the reference of the ground, it kind of can stop your foot from working in.
Yeah.
Versus when it has like a ramp or a squat shoe, it can press into it, which can be a pro and a con. And then I mean, knees over toes guys stuff is popularized some good exercise. I like the tip exercise. The calf work I think is important too. I think doing hamstring curls, especially, so basically you want to train the antagonistic muscle. So you take your rec fem, and that's basically a rec fem is basically a hamstring curl upside down, right? So doing seated and or lying hamstring curls, which you're getting the more shortened hamstring, lengthened quad relatively, and then doing the opposite where he does, like, you don't necessarily need to do the. I don't like the walking backwards so much just because it's not very loadable and it's not very stable,
Yeah.
which you could argue as a pro, but you can do like basically a Bulgarian split squat, or even better, instead of having your foot in a pad, you can put your foot on like a platform behind you, and then you can even elevate your front foot, and so then you just lean back, so you're kind of doing like a one leg Nordic, or what's it called, a one-legged sissy squat kind of thing.
Yeah, that's actually, I could see that helping a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, definitely the hamstring curls too. I didn't do a whole lot of hamstring exercise before. Like I would do like RDLs, but I just
Mhm.
like added in doing like hamstring curls, and that's definitely helped a lot too.
Yeah, and then just isometrics too. That's what they'll typically use for tendon training, just because I forget exactly why, but I think it has something to do with the 20-second. I mean, you don't have to necessarily do 20 seconds. Oh, what they think it is that because the isometric training isn't having a contractile effect on the muscle, moving the tissue, that the joint actually or the tendon itself has to do a lot more work to maintain that tension. Um, which I think
Like
is one of the
wall sits or
theories.
something like that, basically? Is that
Oh, you could do a wall sit, but you could also just instead of holding a leg extension right at the top,
gotcha?
or
Yeah.
same thing with a hamstring curl or like the sissy squat, just spend more time in those lengthened positions. That's basically what the knees over toes philosophy is, right? He's just trying to progressively overload
Yeah.
positions and use different ways to do that. Yeah,
Yeah. But I mean,
biomechanics is fun.
I'd say generally though, like my knee pain's like down so much from just adding
Nice.
that. I also got some like those wide foot shoes too, and I could just tell my feet like started to spread out more. I felt like they were crunched in normal like
Hmm.
just Nikes. So those shoes have also helped too.
What shoes did you get?
I had like I think it's Vivo Barefoot.
Nice.
I bought those for like workout shoes, and then there's another brand I found on Amazon that's just I don't even remember the name of it, but they're just like wide foot shoes that they're a little more stylish, like they kind of look like Vans,
Nice.
and so you don't really look as weird like wearing them. But
You'll have to send me those. I'm always looking for some new shoes.
yeah, definitely check them out. I definitely feel like it takes a little bit to get used to because the bottom is just completely flat. So
Yeah.
like if you're walking a lot, you might want to like just kind of ease into them. But I definitely just feel like my feet just feel way better. And like if you like look at my feet now, I wish I took like a before and after. Like they've just slightly spread out a little bit more. You can tell they're not like being crunched.
And for those of you that don't want to, go the extra mile and wearing barefoot shoes, if you just spend some more time barefoot, you can see a huge difference just in your house. Just don't wear socks. Just walk around barefoot. Keep your floors clean.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. So what are your best tools and strategies for going about the learning process?
So yeah, I definitely would say like if there's something like I want to get interested in, like kind of like first principles philosophy, where like first I'm just gonna like look at like the basic core fundamentals of it, and then kind of move on from there. That's definitely something where like I've definitely learned that now versus like in the past, like nutrition. I remember just not really even having like a understanding of like, okay, what are micronutrients? Like I knew what vitamin C was, but didn't really know like where it fell as far as like what are micronutrients and then how do they impact the body. But if I was going to take that approach now, I would go, okay, like what are the elements in the body? Like we have like carbs, fats, proteins, like what are those made up of? And then like you see like, okay, you have all these micronutrients, minerals, amino acids, and then like fatty acids. And then like looking at those, just kind of getting like a brief understanding of like the overview before you kind of dive deep into like the specifics, I think is huge because it just gives you more context, and then you can make connections easier. And I think I've heard you mention this in the past. Like I'm definitely not a guy who's like trying to memorize everything, but like definitely just kind of seeing those things, and then like later on you can make those connections. Like just having seen that, you don't necessarily need to like focus on memorizing every specific like nutrient or like different process in the body, but just kind of having like a understanding of like the whole system first before you like dive deep.
For sure. I think that's a great way to look at that. How did you describe that? Principle first?
First principles. I feel like, yeah. So just kind of looking at things like the first principles of it, so yeah, if you like want to like lose weight, like look at it as like, okay, you need to be in a calorie deficit, and like there's a million ways to get there. There's a million ways to kind of manipulate that. Like, but like the first principle is like you need to be in a calorie deficit. So
100%.
That's where you start first, and then you just kind of move on. And then you like, as you get deeper, you're like, oh wow, like this micronutrient I might be deficient in. If I kind of fix that deficiency, that helps me like increase my metabolism a little bit. That might help you be like support weight loss better. Things like that will be down the line. But if you don't have that like first understanding, then it's just going to be kind of hard to like make those same connections.
Yeah, that's why I really look for people that have a background in some kind of, and you don't necessarily need to go to school for it. I luckily got schooled in some chemistry and looked forward to diving back into more soon, whenever I have some time for that. But just because you have this underlying principle of how all these things react not necessarily in the body, because you maybe didn't take biochem or whatever, but just how, it's basically physics of chemicals, which adds up, which is basically, chemistry is basically nutrition. It's just on a different level. So, having that first principle, and it's in some ways, it's very much so like, if you say, oh, food is good for me because of X chemical, X nutrient, apigenins in parsley, whatever, then you have to work your way backwards versus the way you're the principle first. First principle is you're starting here and the only way is up versus trying to digress or regress.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like a good approach to take. Like a lot of times, though, I feel like you kind of find yourself like already at the start, like having to work your way backwards. So like sometimes I'll just be like, put that on pause. I'm gonna go like try to just figure out like the general thing first, and then come back to that.
For sure. Yeah, and the things that you have, like again, try not to memorize things, as you said. But the things that you review enough and talk about enough, you'll just memorize without intentionally doing them. My sister right now is in PT school and she has to memorize all the insertions and origins and like the nerve innervations.
Yeah.
And at some point I had a good amount of those probably memorized. But dude, I've lost all of it because it's not you. I know, give or take, where it is, and then I can just Google it and ask ChatGPT, like, draw me a picture. And then as long as you can Google it, it doesn't really make sense. Like, you don't need to memorize it. It's the comprehension that really matters.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, you could spend your time memorizing it, but then, like you said, you go through it and you memorize it, and then you're gonna kind of forget it anyway. We only have so much like bandwidth that we can like use.
It's kind of like RAM. You only have so much RAM.
Yeah, exactly. So
got a lot of memory storage, but useful memory. What have been the biggest rocks for improving your own health?
I would say definitely like eating more. For me, like improving my own health kind of comes down to like gaining weight, because that was like a big health goal of mine. And then just like feeling better, I guess, throughout the day, and just like optimizing my like nutrient intake. So eating more has definitely always been like kind of a struggle until like that's probably why I'm big on like kind of counting your macros, or at least getting like a really good understanding of that, is because that's kind of what I use to really like help propel me into being able to eat more, is like seeing it every day. Like, you had to have that accountability. Yeah. So that was huge for me. And just like kind of just forcing myself to just get used to eating more if I wanted to grow. And then, yeah, just like looking at the food I eat from the kind of ThermoDiet perspective of like micronutrients. So like, instead of just thinking like, oh, this is a banana, it's healthy, it's like, this is a banana, it contains potassium, it contains these B vitamins, contains like these sugars. Like, that's what I'm eating it for, instead of just like it's healthy or not healthy, because you could just argue all day, depending on the person or the context, that something's healthy or not healthy. So really, yeah, like, just looking at it from like the micronutrient perspective, and then how it fits into the rest of your diet too. Like, if you're already good on like certain micronutrients, like you're probably better off focusing on other foods to hit the other micronutrients than you are on just like eating more and more. Like, like a fruitarian diet, it sounds great, but like you're probably depriving yourself of a lot of food you could get from, say, something like red meat. And so it's like, instead of adding more fruit into your diet, why not just add a little bit of red meat, or like maybe a little liver? Like, that's going to have such more benefit than just more fruit.
I saw someone talking about, he's like a mainstream nutritionist. I won't name names, but they're doing overrated or underrated, and they're talking about organ meats, and like, organ meats are overrated. And I was like, dude, how are you going to say that the most micronutrient dense food on the planet is overrated in any context? He was like, exactly. It stinks. It doesn't taste good. You can get the nutrients from somewhere else. Yeah, you can if you eat 30 eggs.
Right. Or, I can just eat 1 ounce of liver and I'm good, like, on so many micronutrients. So yeah, that's where it's like the context is what matters. And yeah, I feel like it's super easy to just say something like, yeah, it's overrated.
For sure.
Because you never really know what the actual context is. And yeah, most people, are they getting enough like vitamin A? I mean, I don't know. So
do not know. It's also one of those harder nutrients to tell. A lot of nutrients are really hard to tell, honestly. Unless you get to the extremes, because a lot of people, in my opinion, are operating with subclinical micronutrient deficiencies, which basically means, is, I'm sure, that you're not dying, you're not on the operating table, they're not trying to figure out what's wrong with you, but you probably feel less good than you should because you're not getting the right amounts of nutrients that you need. And it's also that, like, the RDA is it's a good system, I guess, in the aspect that, it's it's the same thing as our supplements. Our supplements we think this is the best guess that will work for the most people to correct blank issue. The RDA is, we think that this nutrient requirement is for the majority of people, for the, what is it? You said it before, the statistical
like standard deviation or what?
Yeah, for the standard deviation of people will hit their requirement of this nutrient at this, but they also don't account for weight, height, activity level. So there's a lot of missing nuance in that. But
And it's also like, okay, like you need 100 milligrams of vitamin C a day to not get scurvy. So like that's the, like that's the bare minimum. And then, yeah, it's kind of wild just because there is, even then, like someone might in a certain state, like they might need like 5 times as much as that to not get scurvy. Like we don't really have the context. It's like you said, it's just kind of like our best guess. And yeah, a lot of them are just to like avoid getting the nutrient inadequacies or deficiencies. So like you doesn't mean you're necessarily going to benefit from having, or you're probably going to benefit from having like more than that to like help optimize certain processes in the body. And like say you're working out or you're stressed, like, okay, you probably need more minerals. Like it's just like something we already know, but if you just go off the RDA, you're not really going to probably be hitting that. And then you might be like in a suboptimal state. And then, yeah, the mainstream like take on like kind of what healthy is, like we were talking about earlier, would probably be, okay, yeah, you're healthy. Like you don't have any diseases, but it's like, you might not be feeling as great as you could be. So I don't know. To me, I'm just like, I want to feel great. So I'm just going to focus on that. And that just kind of always leads back to eat nutrient dense foods.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people feel less good than they should, or a lot of people think they're healthy and aren't really healthy. So that's another whole topic we could go into. But I wanted to pick your brain, and you can give me some help with what are your best practices for dealing with compliance?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely tricky because like supplements are just in such a weird space because
gray area for sure.
Yeah, and it's even more tricky because there's a lot of really good research on supplements and certain things that we can't really talk about because like the way the FDA regulates drugs is like really like the scrutiny, like they do a lot of scrutiny with like the different like tests and everything that they do and like different studies. And supplements aren't as regulated, which doesn't mean they're bad, but the FDA is just not going to let you say, something that like a supplement can do something that a drug does, which is like, fix, cure, prevent, help any diseases or abnormal conditions. So basically supplements can only help support like your normal health. So it's definitely hard because there's all these like different, like, I feel like I'm always learning more and more about like the like regulatory situation of like compliance and like how supplements fall into that. But yeah, I mean, to me, I always just kind of take it from the perspective of like, we obviously can't give any like medical advice or anything like that, but pointing people, and if they're looking for like help with say supporting their testosterone, like, pointing them towards like Testro X, for example, would probably be the product they would be interested in. And the kind of explaining to them like how it works for like, it's got vitamins, minerals, and like different herbs that help to support healthy testosterone production. And we can talk about like how the ingredients like work in the body. We just can't really, make any claims or like say that they're intended to, treat or cure, prevent any like diseases or diagnosis or anything like that.
I always think it's interesting that you can have the same supplement and a drug. So it could be, let's say, vitamin C, and one went through a drug clinical trial. And because that person, let's say company, went through a clinical trial and is selling this as a drug, they can make these health claims. But you and I are selling this as a supplement, dietary supplement, and cannot make the same health claims. So the exact same thing can have the same effects, but you can make different claims based on the research that's been through. Always thought that was pretty interesting.
It's so wild. And if someone like goes up, like pulls up PubMed and like say you start looking at studies for vitamin C, like there's a lot of really good say studies on it, but a lot of them are, no one's really going to pay for a study to see how something might. I mean, there definitely are a lot out there, like studies on how like an ingredient might help support like an already healthy, person. But people will pay for studies on how like things can help support people that have like an issue or a condition. So there's like a lot of studies that already exist on like a bunch of different, supplements like vitamins, minerals, herbs, and things like that. But a lot of them are all just like based on certain conditions. So it's just kind of funny because we like supplement companies can't market their supplements that way, even if they have like a study for it. So yeah, it's this whole weird thing. It's like, it makes sense because you don't want supplement companies going out there just saying random made up stuff. But at the same time, it's like, we have like good research. So
I mean, it's basically a consequence of people abusing supplements as they used to be called. And now they're just I mean, you have to have the FDA because people used to just sell literally drugs as supplements without any regulation.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. What are your best tips for staying healthy and sane with remote work?
I would say definitely like windows. So I have like 3 windows around me. I feel like that's huge. Making sure I get some sunlight. I'm in Michigan, so like in the winter too, like by the time I'm done working, sometimes it's already like sunset or getting dark out. So just making sure you can get some sunlight during the day is really good. And then, I mean, definitely just having like leaving the house, I feel like is big too. Like I'll just kind of go for a walk sometimes, or like go to the gym, or have an excuse to like go to a grocery store or something like that. Also helps to just make sure you're not like inside your house and not leaving for an entire week. I definitely don't like that feeling. And then another one would be like a standing desk. I feel like that's just super nice because every once in a while, like just stand up, and maybe I'll only stand for like 10, 15 minutes, but then I can just go sit back down. But it really like it helps me just kind of like change my environment slightly. But that's just big. I feel like sitting all day and not moving at all, and like just sitting in the same position, probably not ideal.
Not great. Yeah, I'll add an addendum to that. If you can get a treadmill desk, that's huge.
Yeah, I was looking at those. Like there's little things you can just like slide in right under a standing desk to make it a treadmill. Yeah, I was thinking about getting one of those. It'd be kind of cool.
Yeah, it'd be pretty cool just to get some motion. Motion is lotion, as they say.
Yeah.
Cool. Last couple questions. What is your dream supplement or any supplements you'd like to see formulated at Umzu?
So I mean, creatine, I think that would be awesome. I think everybody wants a creatine supplement. So it's probably only a matter of time, but that would definitely be awesome. Some other things probably that would be cool. I think for me, like I like kind of playing around with like herbs like rhodiola, bacopa, things like that. Like just, like different like adaptogen herbs. I think like some single ingredient products, like we already have like mucuna and things like that to kind of go along with that would be cool. Especially like it allow customers to like kind of stack it with other products too. So stuff like that would be cool. Cause I just like playing around with herbs like that and just to, take it for a couple weeks and see if I notice anything. Well,
I think that's about all the questions I've got. Is there anything you want to ask me?
No, man, I think it was awesome. Appreciate you having me on the podcast.
Yes, sir. Thanks for coming on. It was a great time. Where can everyone find you?
So you can find me on Twitter at Matt, and then it's HAYEZ is the tag. It's probably the only place that you probably want to find me on.
Sounds good. All right. Thanks for coming on, Matt. And thanks everyone for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this episode of ThermoDiet Podcast. Till next time, guys, be good.